Is the Mass boring? I was literally asked this question a couple of months ago by a student who once said to me, "Father, I get super bored at Mass on Sunday, and you're a priest and you celebrate Mass every day. Doesn't it get kind of tedious?" I thought this was a really good question, and after thinking about it, yes, absolutely. The Mass can easily be deeply boring if I or we come with any one of three things. The Mass will always be boring. If we come without a deep knowledge of what is happening, the Mass will always be boring. If I come without a deep faith in what is happening, the Mass will always be boring. If I come without a real hunger for God at the Mass will always be boring. Okay, a few things on each one of those three things. If I do not come with real understanding of what is happening, the Mass will always be boring. Imagine if you and I went to a place like Washington, D.C., and we traveled and saw all the great places of significance there. We went to the Washington Memorial, or the Lincoln Memorial. We went to Arlington National Cemetery. We went to the Holocaust Museum. We saw all these places, but we had no historical background or knowledge of what these things meant or their significance. We might walk around like, hey, that's a nice looking stone object. Maybe we'll take a picture. We'll move on, because we have not understood the meaningful import, the historical details that make these monuments or places come alive. If I'm coming to Mass and I don't realize what's behind the prayer I'm saying, what's behind the gesture I'm doing, what's behind what I'm hearing and sensing, the Mass will always be boring. So do we seek to learn about what is happening? It's a great hinge point for the Mass becoming not boring, but amazingly impactful and meaningful. Okay, second point. If I come without a deep faith in what is happening, the Mass will always be boring. Faith not only is an understanding of what is happening, but it's I believe that that is true. Faith assents to what is real. Now, when I was growing up, it was 1994, summer of 1994, I went with my dad to McDonald's, of all places, in River Falls, Wisconsin. And it was a nice summer day, and I was kind of excited to be there. And at one point in the line at McDonald's, my dad leans over to me and whispers, he says, "Son, do you realize who's in front of you?" And I looked, and it was a nondescript, larger, athletically built man, but I had no idea who it was. I said, "No." My dad said, "Let me introduce you to Joe Montana, one of the most famous NFL quarterbacks who ever lived." He played that summer in 1994. He was playing for the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Chiefs were using River Falls, Wisconsin as their practice facility. That occasion, that summer day of 1994, my experience at McDonald's went from, hey, this is kind of nice, I'm excited to be here, to one of the most impactful moments in my young kid life of meeting Joe Montana. Faith recognizes that the words that are being spoken through the Word of God are the words of God. Faith recognizes Jesus in the breaking of the bread. Not just bread, but Jesus in the breaking of the bread. That's Luke chapter 24. When the disciples who were walking with that nondescript man on the road to Emmaus, they're like, hey, he's kind of a nice guy. He understands some things. It was a good little Bible study, so to speak. And then it was at the breaking of the bread when they recognized that the one they were speaking with was Jesus. That was the event that made them run out of that upper room and go to Jerusalem to tell the apostles what they had seen. If I'm coming to Mass without real faith, a recognition, and a belief, I believe this, then the Mass will always be boring. Third and final thing, if I come to Mass without a deep hunger for God, then the Mass will always be boring. Imagine if you and I throughout the week, we just binged on really bad junk food all week. We just had Twinkies, we had Three Musketeers, we had Snickers, we had just really terrible food all week long. And then at the end of the week, someone, after having been completely filled up with all this junk food, somebody offered us an exquisite sirloin steak. We'd be like, oh, I wish I was hungry for it, but I'm just so stuffed. If we're filling ourselves up all week with just the junk food of the world, the here and now, the fleetingness of so many things that ultimately have very little to no significance, then when I come to be fed by heavenly things, I won't even be hungry for it. If I'm just playing video games all week on my spare time, then yes, the Mass will always be boring because it's not entertainment. If I come to Mass having never really thought about God or prayed or sought to follow His commandments and strained myself to live for Him, then yeah, the Mass will always be boring. So What Jesus is inviting us to is to work up a lively hunger so that I can be satisfied with the deepest treasures of heavenly things, the very body and blood and word of God. So hopefully these three things help us to not just go to Mass where that's boring, but if we're coming with deep faith, deep understanding, and a deep hunger, not only will the Mass never be boring, it's going to be one of the most life-changing encounters or events I could ever participate in. God bless you.